Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review. In today's video I'm going to review King's Disease 3 by Nas. This is the brand new project in the King's Disease series, finishing the part of the trilogy. Now I don't really know if we're gonna see other King's Disease releases in the future, but as it goes on, this is the third album in the series. And it's actually one of those series of projects that brought Nas back to the table, actually providing what is considered for most to be some of the greatest material that we've heard from Nas in like his entire discography. Now things didn't really start that much strong with the release of the first King's Disease album, which I would say that I also didn't really find this album to be particularly or that interesting. I just thought it was an average album, not really providing something that much to the sound of Nas. It is an album that was pretty standard and went into directions that at the time I just felt that they were outdated and they didn't really manage to bring that much of a vintage feel or really embrace that much the sound of the more old school hip hop approach. King's Disease 2 was considered a big improvement and an album that was much better. Now, I personally am a little bit indifferent with this album, as I would say that this was just another really average release. I would say that I could definitely see some improvements when it comes to the production and the overall sound of the project and the beats. However, it was still an album that I didn't really find particularly all that interesting. I thought it was just okay, but beyond that, I couldn't really consider this to be that much of a great album. But I'd say that this kinda changes with King's Disease 3 over here, which is why I'm talking about this album right now. I'd say that this is a vast improvement in comparison to the other two albums, or I would just say that this is the album that ended up clicking with me. For me, this album feels much more well balanced, much more polished, and I really like the production and the overall sound out of this project. I believe that some of the beats over here sound actually really good with the overall instrumentation surrounding them. It still goes into some really standard approaches on old school hip hop, just like we saw with the previous two albums. It's just that in this case it ended up clicking with me, having ideas that would feel much more memorable and compelling in comparison to what we got with the previous two albums, which for me were pretty forgettable. But over here I actually ended up digging lots of the tracks. I still couldn't say that I love this album, but I believe that this is definitely some of the best stuff that we've got from Nas in recent memory. And in terms of delivery, it's still another pretty decent album. Nas is a pretty good rapper and he keeps on with his standard delivery, which is nothing that much stand out, but it simply works, it's simply fine. But for me the best comes with the production and some of the instrumentals over here. And for me the album makes a pretty solid introduction with some of the more orchestral and epic themes we get with tracks like Ghetto Reporter, which for me it's a pretty good introduction, like the overall pacing and how it builds up for what comes next with the album. The track Legit also sounds pretty fine in my opinion. It is a track that goes into some really nice cheerful passages as it goes on, and I'd say that I like the piano melodies and just how much of a catchy and fun tune it is. Thun is possibly my favorite moment over here. I really like the overall aesthetic that this track creates. Due to its more orchestral instrumentation, it manages to sound really grandiose. It is attached with a really nice and simplistic beat, but the overall instrumentation and the production out of this track is really solid and it makes for what I would consider to be the greatest moment over here, and the track that I would overall say it's pretty good in the Nas catalog. The track Michael and Quincy seems to start with some standard approaches, but then as we get towards the end of the song we actually get the first proper trap portion over here, which I wouldn't really say it really comes that much out of nowhere. It comes from a pretty nice transition point and I like the energy out of this portion, so I was hoping that this would last a bit longer because it is a really short portion towards the end of the song, and in my opinion, if it was developed a bit further and we got more out of this portion, this track would be even more compelling because it feels like this part was just slightly rushed and in my opinion they could have done more with this. The album as it goes on doesn't really provide that many highlights this is the moment where the album kinda has a certain tone and becomes a little bit repetitive, with some cool ideas here and there. There were still tracks that I enjoyed, but then we have moments like Recession Roof, which sounds pretty average. I'd also kinda say the same thing with the track series Interlude, which ends up being kinda longer than some of the songs over here, and it feels kinda lackluster at times. While it has some pretty nice ideas with its melodies, I can't really say it does that much with what it has. Also kind of the same case with the track I'm on Fire. It doesn't really feel like that much of a fully developed song. There could have been a bit more done with this, but it wasn't really that much of an engaging idea in my opinion in the first place. I ended up kinda digging the sound of the track What the Fuck SMH, mainly because it is slightly darker and has a bit of a more aggressive tone to it. It feels more of like a banger, and even the very minimal transitional point towards the second half still sounds pretty engaging and does make for one of the better moments in the album overall. I also kinda like the overall vibes out of the track Once a Man, Twice a Child. It feels kinda wholesome, there is a bit of a sad tone to it. I like this more personal side and the sentiment that we get out of this song. First Time is also a cool song in my opinion, kinda dig the concept out of this one, and it's also a pretty fine and cheerful song, kind of a different direction than what we see with the track Beef, which I'd say I like its somewhat more aggressive elements and how straightforward it is. I think that due to its energy it makes for one of the more intriguing moments out of this album. And I would also say that the track Don't Shoot was a bit of a grower. Kinda dig the sampling and the overall instrumentation out of this one. I think it makes for a pretty solid moment. I wouldn't really say the same for the bonus track Till My Last Breath. It kinda felt unnecessary. This was the one track that would primarily focus on a trap beat, and I wouldn't even say that I particularly liked the sampling out of this thing, so I'd say that this was kind of unnecessary and certainly not the best way to finish the album. I believe that Don't Shoot makes for a much better way to conclude this overall experience. With that being said, I'm still pretty satisfied with a brand new album of Nas. It exceeded my expectations, not to that much of a long extent, but I still prefer this much more in comparison to the very first two albums, which I only found them to be average. For Nas standards, this is certainly not an exceptional album. It's still better than what I expected, and I found some tracks over here that were pretty enjoyable. Really cool production, really cool sound overall, nice instrumentation, some pretty cool and catchy beats, and yeah, I believe that this is a pretty decent project overall. I'm gonna give King's Disease 3 a 7 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why? And what do you want to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.